envelope was sitting on the passenger seat of the wrong car. Not left behind by accident, not slipped under a wiper blade. Sitting upright against the center console of Truck 4, the green Ford F-250 assigned to Joel Garrett of the Denton County Roads Department, as though someone had placed it there deliberately and then simply walked away. Joel noticed it at 6:12 in the morning when he climbed in to start his shift. His first thought was that one of the younger guys on the crew had left something. His second thought, when he saw the name printed on the front of the envelope in careful block letters, was that he had never seen that name before in his life. Harlan T. Voss, and below it, in smaller letters, personal, confidential, return to sender if found. There was no return address. Joel set it on the dash without opening it. He had a 12-mile stretch of Route 9 to patch before the morning traffic picked up, and he had learned a long time ago that other people's business had a way of becoming your problem the moment you let it through the door. He had 2 boys. Aaron was 9 and had recently decided that breakfast was optional. Brendan was 6 and still climbed into Joel's bed on Thursday mornings for reasons that had never been explained and did not need to be. Their mother, Claire, had been gone for 3 years. Not gone the way people mean when they soften it. Gone completely. A blood clot, a Tuesday, a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic, and the particular kind of silence that settles in after the machines stop. Joel had kept the house, kept the job, kept the boys on schedule. He had not done any of this gracefully. He had done it the way a man does things when there is no option that does not involve doing them. The envelope sat on the dash for the length of his morning route. He did not open it. At noon, he sat in the truck cab with a thermos of coffee that had gone cold and stared at the name again. Harlan T. Voss. He typed it into his phone while he ate the sandwich. Aaron had very seriously packed for him that morning, pressing the bread flat with both hands the way Claire used to. The search returned a LinkedIn page, a Voss Capital Group, a business address on Meridian Parkway in downtown Denton. The photograph showed a man in his late 50s, silver-haired, the kind of straight-backed posture that either came from military service or from a lifetime of never having to apologize for taking up space. Joel looked at his own reflection in the rearview mirror. Work boots, high-visibility vest, a streak of joint compound across his left forearm he had not noticed until now. He called the main number for Voss Capital Group. A receptionist answered on the second ring. He said he was a county roads employee and that he had found something that appeared to belong to a Mr. Harlan Voss and that he would like to return it. There was a pause. She asked him to hold. He held for 4 minutes. She came back and gave him an address on Meridian Parkway and told him he could come by after 3 o'clock. He spent the rest of the afternoon on the Route 9 shoulder, raking gravel and thinking about nothing in particular. Brendan was at after-school care until 5. Aaron had soccer. Joel had a window. He drove to Meridian Parkway still in his work clothes because there was no version of this that required him to dress for it. The Voss Capital Group occupied the top 2 floors of a glass building that reflected the afternoon sky in a way that made it look like it was made of weather rather than material. Joel found parking on the street, fed the meter, and went in through the lobby doors with the envelope in his left hand. The receptionist inside looked at him the way certain receptionists look at people who do not belong in the building they're standing in. Not with hostility exactly, but with a careful neutrality that communicated the same thing. She took his name. She took his name. She told him someone would be right down. He sat in a chair near the window and watched taxis move in both directions on Meridian Parkway and thought about whether he had remembered to buy more of the orange juice Aaron liked. He had not. The man who came down was not Harlan Voss. He was younger, mid-40s, with a tailored jacket and the kind of watch that does not need to announce itself because the people who know already know. He introduced himself as Drew Cannon, Chief Operating Officer. He extended his hand in the direction of the envelope. Joel did not give it to him. He said politely that the name on the envelope was Harlan Voss and that he would prefer to hand it to Mr. Voss directly if that was possible. He was happy to wait. Drew Cannon's expression did not change, but something in his jaw tightened by a degree. He said Mr. Voss was in back-to-back meetings for the remainder of the afternoon. He said that as COO, he was fully authorized to receive correspondence on Mr. Voss's behalf. He said this with the confidence of a man who was accustomed to that being the end of the conversation. Joel said he understood and that he would come back tomorrow if today was not convenient. Drew Cannon looked at him for a moment. Then he said he would see if Mr. Voss had 5 minutes. Joel sat back down. A woman at the front desk pretended to look at her screen. The elevator bank hummed. Outside, A delivery truck was double parked on Meridian and the taxi behind it was doing the specific kind of patient waiting that meant the driver had stopped caring 20 minutes ago. Harlan Voss came out of the elevator at 3047. He was taller than his photograph, broader in the shoulders, with a kind of face that had probably been handsome 30 years ago and had since settled into something more useful. He looked at Joel first, then at the envelope, and his expression did something brief and complicated before going flat again. He shook Joel's hand without preamble. Joel handed him the envelope. Harlan took it. He turned it over once in his hands, ran his thumb along the sealed edge, and said thank you in a way that meant something more than the words. Joel said it was no trouble. He said the envelope had been on the passenger seat of his work truck when he started his shift, and he had not opened it and had no idea how it got there. Harlan looked at him for a moment. Then he said, in a quieter voice, that he understood, and that he appreciated the care Joel had taken. There was something in the way he said it. Not relief exactly. More like a man exhaling after holding his breath for a long time. Joel drove home thinking about orange juice and whether Aaron's shin guards were still in the back of the truck where he'd left them after last week's game. He did not think about the envelope. He had returned it. That was done. 2 days later, a man came to the Route 9 site in the middle of the afternoon. He was not wearing a work vest. He was not from the county. He parked a black Audi on the gravel shoulder and walked toward Joel with his hands in the pockets of a jacket that cost more than Joel's monthly grocery budget. His name, Joel would learn, was Stuart Feld. He had the careful, pleasant manner of a person who had spent years being effective at things other people found unpleasant. He said he understood Joel had returned something to Harlan Voss 2 days prior. He said this conversationally, the way you mentioned the weather. Joel kept working. He said he had returned a piece of mail that ended up in his truck by mistake. Stuart said he understood. He said these things happened. He said he wanted to make sure Joel understood that whatever was in that envelope was a private matter, and that discretion was something his employer was prepared to compensate generously. Joel set down his tamping bar and looked at the man directly. He said he had not opened the envelope. He had found it, he had returned it, and there was nothing further he had to say about it. Stuart reached into his jacket and produced an envelope of his own, white, unsealed at one end. He placed it on the roof of Joel's truck. He said there was $18,000 inside. No conditions, no paperwork. A gesture of goodwill from people who valued privacy. Joel looked at the envelope on the truck roof. He looked at Stuart. He did not pick it up. Stuart's expression stayed pleasant. Then he mentioned in the same conversational tone that he had noticed Joel had 2 boys in the Denton County School District. He mentioned the name of Aaron's soccer league. He mentioned that the Route 9 contract came up for renewal with the county board in the spring, and that the board members in question were people his employer had relationships with. He said none of this as a threat. He said it the way you share information that is simply factual and available to anyone who looks. Joel picked up his tamping bar. He said quietly that the man had just told him everything he needed to know. Stuart picked up his envelope from the truck roof and walked back to the Audi without hurrying. Joel watched him go. Then he took his phone out and stood on the shoulder of Route 9 for a long moment looking at it. He thought about Claire. He thought about the specific expression she had worn on Tuesday mornings when she was moving fast and running late, and still always stopped to leave a note on the counter for whoever woke up after she left. He thought about the $220 he had in checking and the $900 he owed on the Kia, and the fact that Brendan needed new cleats before the spring season and they cost $65 at the sports outlet on Millway, and that $65 was an amount Joel had been quietly moving around in his budget for 3 weeks without finding a place for it. He thought about all of that, and then he opened his phone and searched for Harlan T. Voss and looked at the company website until he found the name of Harlan's personal assistant. Her name was Carol Briggs. He called the main line, asked for Carol Briggs. He called the main line, asked for Carol Briggs, got her voicemail, and left a message. He said his name clearly. He said he was the roads employee who had returned the envelope 2 days ago. He said that someone had come to his job site today and offered him money to stay quiet about something he had never opened, and that he thought Mr. Voss should know. He hung up and went back to work. Carol Briggs listened to the message twice before she brought it to Harlan. Harlan listened to her read it back and did not move for a moment. Then he asked her to pull the file on Stuart Feld. Then he asked her to get him Joel Garrett's contact information from the county roads department. He had known about Stuart for 11 weeks. Not Stewart specifically, but the mechanism. The quiet transfers, the rerouted invoices, the accounts that processed under subsidiary names that did not quite exist. Voss Capital Group had 14 operating subsidiaries and an infrastructure fund that managed contracts across 6 counties. It was large enough that the kind of thing Drew Cannon had been doing for the better part of 2 years had required a specific effort to see, and Harlan had been a long time seeing it. The envelope he had been carrying in his jacket for 3 days before he lost it contained a summary prepared by an outside forensic accountant. Not the full audit. That was already in the hands of the firm's independent counsel, but the summary. 12 pages, with enough specific figures and account numbers that if it had been in the wrong hands for more than a few hours, the paperwork trail would have been redirected before the board meeting could be called. He had not known how he had lost it. He had not known it was in a county roads truck until Carol told him a man named Joel Garrett had called. He pulled the background summary his assistant had compiled. Joel Garrett, 38, Denton County Roads Department, 7 years of service, consistent performance reviews. Widower, wife Claire Garrett, deceased 3 years prior. 2 sons, Aaron, 9, and Brendan, 6. The accident report was brief. A highway pileup on the southbound connector. Claire had been in the third car. She had been 34 years old. Harlan sat with that for a while. The Voss Capital Infrastructure Fund had a community partnership program. It had issued a grant 3 years ago to St. Luke's Medical Center for expanded trauma care in the southbound connector corridor. The grant had been approved in a board session Harlan had chaired. It had covered trauma response equipment for the corridor where Claire Garrett's accident had occurred. He did not know if that equipment had made a difference on that specific Tuesday. He did not know if it had been there or not. He only knew that he had signed a grant and that the money had gone where it was supposed to go, unlike the $31 million that Drew Cannon had been redirecting through shell accounts for the better part of 2 years, much of it from the same infrastructure fund. Much of it from programs that were supposed to be doing exactly this kind of work in exactly these kinds of communities. He called Joel Garrett that evening. Joel was making dinner. Aaron was at the table doing homework that he appeared to be doing while also watching a video on his tablet, a combination Joel had decided to ignore for the moment because the homework was getting done. Brendan was under the table, which was where Brendan went when he was tired. Joel did not know exactly when this had started, but it seemed to serve some purpose, so he had stopped questioning it. His phone rang. He didn't recognize the number. He answered because the boys' school sometimes called from unknown numbers. Harlan said his name. He said he was sorry to call in the evening. He said he owed Joel a conversation. Joel told Aaron to keep working and stepped into the hallway. They talked for 22 minutes. Harlan told him what was in the envelope without telling him more than he needed to know. He told him about Drew Cannon and the infrastructure fund and the redirected money. He told him that the board meeting to present the forensic findings was scheduled for the following week, and that he had reason to believe Drew had known the envelope existed and had arranged for it to go missing, though he did not yet know how it had ended up in Joel's truck. He said he was not calling to ask anything of Joel. He said he wanted Joel to understand what he had returned and to know that the care he had taken mattered. Joel stood in the hallway and listened. The refrigerator hummed. Through the kitchen doorway, he could see Brendan's feet sticking out from under the table. Then Harlan told him about the infrastructure fund. He told him what the grant program was supposed to do and what it had actually been funding before Drew redirected it. He named the counties. He named the corridor. Joel was quiet for a moment. He said he remembered the southbound connector. Harlan said he did too. There was a silence between them that was not uncomfortable. Joel said, "I never opened that envelope. I didn't know any of this." Harlan said he knew. Joel said, "Someone came to my job site today." Harlan said he knew that too. Joel said, "He mentioned my boys." There was a pause on the other end of the line. When Harlan spoke again, his voice was level, but something underneath it had changed. He said, "I understand." He said, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to know that the answer will not change anything I've already decided to do." He said, "Would you be willing to give a statement to the firm's independent counsel? Not about the envelope's contents, you didn't read it, about the approach, the man who came to your job site, what he said and what he offered." Joel looked at the kitchen doorway. Aaron had given up on the homework pretense and was watching his tablet openly. Brendan's feet had stopped moving, which meant he was probably asleep under the table, a thing that had happened more than once. He said yes. He said it once without elaborating because it was not a complicated answer. He went back into the kitchen and turned down the burner under the pot and picked Brendan up off the floor, which Brendan accepted without fully waking, and carried him to the couch and covered him with the blanket they kept folded on the armrest for exactly this purpose. Aaron looked up from his tablet. "Is everything okay, Dad?" Joel said yes. He said, "Finish your homework." He said, "Dinner in 10 minutes." Aaron considered this assessment and returned to his tablet. The statement took 2 hours on a Saturday morning at the offices of Alderman Foch and Ray, 6 floors above a parking garage on Commerce Street. Joel brought the boys because there was no one else. Brendan drew on a yellow legal pad while Aaron very seriously asked the paralegal a number of questions about what lawyers did all day, which the paralegal answered with more patience than the questions strictly required. Joel stated what had happened in the order that it had happened. He described the envelope on the passenger seat. He described returning it. He described the man who came to Route 9. He quoted what Stuart Feld had said as closely as he could remember. He mentioned the figure offered. He mentioned the comments about his son's school and Aaron's soccer league and the spring contract renewal. He did not characterize Stuart Feld's intent. He did not say what he believed the purpose of the visit had been. He described what was said and in what order and left the characterization to people who were paid to do that. It took 2 hours. On the way home, Aaron asked if they could get lunch at the place with the orange plastic trays. Joel said yes. Brendan asked for extra pickles. Joel said he would ask. The Voss Capital Group Emergency Board session convened on a Thursday morning in a conference room on the 14th floor with floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the parking structure on Commerce and, past that, the low skyline of Denton's west side. 11 board members were seated. Drew Cannon was present with his own legal counsel, a pair of attorneys from a firm out of Dallas whose presence communicated a level of preparation that in ordinary circumstances would have felt reassuring. These were not ordinary circumstances. Harlan stood at the head of the table and presented the forensic audit findings without preamble. The audit covered 26 months. It documented $31.4 million in infrastructure fund disbursements that had been processed through 4 subsidiary accounts and routed to a holding company registered in Nevada that had no operational presence and no verifiable purpose. Every transfer authorization bore Drew Cannon's digital signature. Every disbursement had been countersigned by department heads who had been presented with documentation that misidentified the receiving entities. The board chair placed a printed copy of an internal email in front of Drew Cannon. The email had been sent from Drew's work account to the Nevada Holding Company's registered agent 8 days before Joel Garrett found the envelope. The subject line was follow-up. The final line read, "Confirm receipt and close this channel by end of month." Drew's attorney began to say something. Drew put his hand on the attorney's arm. Drew did not speak. Joel's statement was entered into the record. The board chair read the relevant section aloud. When he reached the part about Stuart Feld's comments regarding the boys' school and the spring contract renewal, 2 of the board members exchanged a look across the table. Drew was asked to step outside while the independent audit team completed their formal review. He stood, straightened his jacket, and walked the length of the table toward the door. He passed the chair where the statement was sitting on the table and did not look at it and did not say anything and walked out and the door closed behind him. The story ran in the Denton Register by noon and was picked up by 4 regional outlets by 3 o'clock. The headline that spread furthest read, "Voss Capital COO charged in 31 Mound Infrastructure Fund, fraud." The follow-up piece, which ran 2 days later, broke down which programs had been affected: 11 county contracts, 4 road corridor safety improvement projects, a trauma response equipment grant covering the southbound connector and 3 adjacent routes. Joel read about it on his phone in the truck during his lunch break. He read it twice. Then, he put the phone in his cup holder and ate the rest of his sandwich. A reporter found him the following morning on Route 9. He was repairing a section of guardrail near the mile 12 marker. She asked him how it felt to be the person whose honesty had uncovered a $31 million fraud. He thought about how to answer that. He thought about it for a moment longer than she seemed to expect. He said he had found something in his truck that wasn't his, and he had returned it. He said he had told the truth when someone came and asked him not to. He said he thought most people would have done the same. She asked if he considered himself a hero. He said he considered himself behind on guardrails and thanked her for coming out. She laughed, which he had not entirely expected, and shook his hand and left. Aaron saw the news article shared in his class group chat that evening. He came to the kitchen with his phone held out. showing Joel the screen with the specific expression children wear when they are trying to determine whether something is as significant as it seems or if the adults have context that changes things. Joel looked at the screen. There was a photo of him from a county department file, probably 2 years old. He looked tired in it, which was accurate. "Is that you, Dad?" "Yes." "Did you know that was going to happen when you gave the envelope back?" "No," Joel said. "I just knew it wasn't mine to keep." Aaron looked at the phone again. He looked at Joel. He set the phone down on the counter face down, which was what he did when he had decided something was settled. They had dinner. Brendan knocked over his cup of milk and was distressed about it for approximately 45 seconds and then stopped being distressed about it, which was one of the things Joel quietly admired about being 6. The milk got cleaned up. Aaron asked for seconds. The evening went the way evenings went. Later, after the boys were in bed, Joel sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that was actually still warm and looked at nothing in particular for a while. He thought about Claire. He thought about the way she had put her hand on the counter when she was reading something and didn't want to stop to sit down. He thought about Tuesday mornings and the notes she left. He thought about the southbound connector and what Harlan Voss had told him about the grant program and the trauma corridor. He did not know if any of it was connected in the way you wanted things to be connected when you were sitting alone in a quiet kitchen at 10 o'clock at night. He only knew that the money had been supposed to go somewhere specific, and that for 26 months it had been going somewhere else instead, and that somewhere along the line one man in a county roads uniform had picked up an envelope that wasn't his and decided to return it because there was nothing complicated about that decision when you had already decided who you were going to be. Harlan Voss came to Denton County Route 9 on a Wednesday afternoon in November, 3 weeks after the board meeting. He parked a plain sedan on the shoulder. He was wearing a coat with the collar turned up against the wind off the fields. He walked over to where Joel was finishing a drainage inspection and waited. Joel saw him coming and finished what he was writing on the inspection sheet before he looked up. Harlan said he wanted to say something in person. Joel nodded. Harlan told him about Claire's corridor. Not softly, not with the careful cushioning people use when they are trying to deliver information they believe will hurt. He said it plainly. The way Joel had come to understand Harlan said most things. He said the trauma response grad that had been cut by Drew Cannon's redirections had included a rapid deployment unit for the southbound connector. That unit had been delayed for 14 months. He said he did not know, and could not know, what difference it might have made on any specific day or in any specific incident. He said he had read the accident report. He said he had read Claire's name. He said he was not telling Joel this to apologize on behalf of a process. He was telling him because Joel deserved to have the full picture, and because Harlan was the one who had signed the grant and then had not been watching closely enough to notice when it stopped being funded. Joel stood on the shoulder of Route 9 with the wind coming off the fields and looked at the drainage ditch he had just finished inspecting. He was quiet for a while. Then he said, "I picked up that envelope before I knew any of this. Before I knew your name. Before I knew what was in it. Before any of it." He looked at Harlan. "I'm not telling you that, so you'll feel better about it. I'm telling you, so you know it was never about what I might get out of it." Harlan said he knew. Joel said, "The programs that were cut, the safety work on the corridors." He said, "Make sure that gets funded again, not as a one-time thing, as something that stays." Harlan said he would. Joel believed him. 4 months later, the elm trees along the Route 9 corridor were putting out leaves the way they do in April when the winter has been long but not cruel. Faint and tentative at first, then suddenly simply there between 1 week and the next. Joel Garrett was still on Route 9. His uniform was still the same one he'd had for 2 years, faded at the left sleeve where he always rested his arm on the truck door. In January, he had been offered a supervisory position covering 3 county routes. He had taken it because the pay increase was real and because it was offered on the basis of the work he had done, which was the only basis on which he had ever wanted anything offered to him. He used the first 3 months of the higher pay to cover Brendan's cleats, Aaron's spring fees, and the back portion of the heating bill he had been carrying since December. He opened a savings account. He put a $40 in it. It was a start. On the first Thursday in April, Brendan climbed into Joel's bed at 6 in the morning for no stated reason, as was his practice, and lay there looking at the ceiling. Joel lay there looking at the ceiling with him. After a while, Brendan said, "Dad, why did you keep that envelope for a whole day before you gave it back?" Joel thought about that. He said, "I kept it because I wanted to make sure I gave it to the right person." Brendan considered this. He said, "How did you know who the right person was?" Joel said, "It had a name on it." Brendan appeared satisfied with this. He rolled over and went back to sleep. Joel lay there for another few minutes in the quiet of the early morning, the light coming in gray and thin through the window. The house still, both boys breathing somewhere in the vicinity of normal. After a while, he got up and made coffee and stood at the counter waiting for it, and thought about what it meant to find something that did not belong to you, and to choose, without drama and without expectation, to carry it carefully until you could put it back where it was supposed to be. There was no version of that choice that required a reward. There was no version that required anyone to see it or name it or print it in the Denton register. There was only the thing that needed doing and the kind of person you had to be in order to do it. And then the ordinary morning on the other side, with the coffee ready and the boys still asleep, and the work waiting and the day beginning the way days begin when you have not done anything you will have to account for later. That was enough. It had always been enough. Joel Garrett had known this since before he could have said so, the way people know the things that matter most to them, not because they arrived at them to argument, but because when the moment came, the answer was already there. I keep thinking about the moment Joel found that envelope on the passenger seat and just set it on the dash. Didn't open it, didn't wonder what was in it for himself. Just set it there and went to work. That's the part that stays with me, because most of us would have at least looked, and nobody would have blamed him if he had. But here's what I've come to understand about people like Joel. The choice he made wasn't made in that moment. It was made years earlier, in the accumulation of small decisions about who he was going to be when nobody was watching and nothing was on the line. By the time the envelope appeared, the answer was already settled. He just acted accordingly. There's something in that I think about a lot. We tend to believe that character is tested in the big moments, the boardroom, the confrontation, the camera on. But I don't think that's where it's actually built. It's built on a Tuesday afternoon in a county truck when you're tired and behind on the heating bill, and you find something that isn't yours, and you do the right thing anyway, even though the right thing costs you a half day and a tank of gas and nothing else. Joel didn't have any obvious reason to trust that returning the envelope would go well. He had every reason, financial, personal, practical, to hand it to the first person who asked for it and walk away. Instead, he said no. The name on this belongs to a specific person, and I'm going to find that person. That's not naivety. That's a kind of quiet, deliberate intelligence that knows the difference between what is easy and what is correct, and chooses correctly without making a speech about it. And then when Stuart Feld came to Route 9 with $18,000 and a thinly veiled mention of Aaron's school and Brendan's soccer league, that was the real test. Not of courage in any dramatic sense, of nerve, of the capacity to hold your position when the pressure is personal and the mat is real, and you're the only one on that gravel shoulder who knows what you're choosing. Joel held. Not because he was fearless, because he had already decided, somewhere back behind all of it, what kind of man he was going to be in front of his sons, whether they were watching or not. The way causes and consequences work in a life isn't always visible while it's happening. Joel returned an envelope. That returned a witness. That witness gave a statement. That statement helped expose $31 million taken from the people who needed it most, and somewhere in that chain the programs that were supposed to protect corridors like the one where Claire died. Those programs got funded again. Not because the universe arranged it poetically, because one person refused to look away, and that refusal mattered more than he could have known when he was standing alone on a cold shoulder road deciding what to do. I'm not sure there's a cleaner definition of integrity than that. Doing the right thing before you know it matters. Holding to it when it costs you something real. Trusting that the work itself is enough, even when nobody is writing your name in a headline. Joel Garrett went home and made dinner and checked on his boys. That was the whole ending, and somehow that's exactly right.